All right, good morning. This is for people that decided to use Fusion 360 instead of Onshape. This video is meant for you to be able to follow along and construct the key fob yourself. And then if you have any questions or whatever, you can come into class and get some help or support that way. So I won't be going over this entire process in class unless there's time, but wanted to get you set up here. So first thing, if you haven't already, once you open Fusion, make sure you're on an educational license. Otherwise, it can expire in like 30 days or 90 days or something like that. Also, after that, create a folder to put your stuff in. I have a lot of folders here. There's probably 3 of them, some version of 398. You want to do that as well. After that, we're going to come over here to the main screen. I'm going to move this, close that data panel out. And once I start a project, the first thing I want to do is hit save. It does not automatically save like Onshape does with Cloud. But once you click save once, then it will start saving. So I'm going to call this key fob 2023 and go from there. So I'm saving this in this location, of course. Saving this in this location. If you want to change your location, you can change it here. Go ahead and click save. All right, so that allows me to at least start out with a project that's going to get saved if something should happen. Next thing, and it's kind of weird that we had to do a bunch of stuff before we really get started. A good habit to get into is create a new component because eventually projects will end up with a lot of components. So if you just start out with one component, right now it's not going to be like, well, why am I doing all this? It's if we add like parts or bolts or anything else to something later, probably not this project, obviously, it's just a key fob, but it's a lot easier to have individual components and you can edit them and it's not all kind of, strewn together or intertwined together. You want separate pieces for each thing. So you want to do that. Like, for instance, a door hinge. You have 2 pieces of hinge and then the pin that goes in the middle. So that'd be like 3 components. Makes it easier to assemble and then even animate those kind of things. All right, so once I create a new component, I can name it here. I'm just going to call it fob and click OK. So you'll notice now the key fob is the main project, and then this is one little box. The main project has a bunch of boxes. That's going to assembly. Not getting into it too much, but just know that's there. So, and this little dot here is saying that it's the active component. All right, so let's get started. So up top here, we have our toolbar. The toolbar here allows us to select different options. In fact, even above the toolbar, there's different spaces: surface, mesh, sheet metal, things like that. Although we are 3D printing, we're not going to be using the plastic one. That's a different thing for like manufacturing stuff. So the very first thing is typically in most 3D modeling is you're going to create a sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and click this little plus sign here, and then you'll notice these things pop up. This is the planes of X, Y, and Z. You can kind of see them over here and with the view cube, front, right, and top, but it's essentially X, Y, and Z planes. So I'm going to select this bottom one here. This is the XY plane. It really doesn't matter for this project which one you select, but I'm just going to do this because that's typically where I start on most of my projects. So once I click that plane, it kind of faces normal to that plane. So you can kind of see now Z, if you can imagine, this is coming straight out of the screen. X is going to the right and Y is going up, typically like a Cartesian coordinate system. All right, so first things first, we're going to start with a rectangle. So I'm going to click up here. Oh, notice also that this changed. There was a whole bunch of different options when we were back in the just the original screen. Now my toolbar has changed and it is filled with sketch tools. So right now I'm going to click 2-point rectangle. I'm actually not going to do a 2-point, but I'm going to click it. There's also, if you notice when we hovered over it, it said R. You could, that little R there, you could also just click or press R on your keyboard. Now over on the right-hand side now, this thing is called a sketch palette. This allows me to change what type of rectangle I want to draw. Very popular one's 2-point. You just define opposite corners of the rectangle. Another one is a 3-point rectangle. The one we actually want, though, it's the most popular one for me, is the center rectangle. I don't change. You can change these in the toolbar. I don't, because I don't expect you to go and change everything in the toolbar before we begin. So I try to keep a quote unquote stock version of Fusion 360. So that way you will see the same, or you're seeing on my screen the same thing you're seeing. All right, that orange thing can go away. All right, so this is the kind of the origin here. So notice as I get close to it, it kind of clicks or snaps to it. And then it says place center point. So I'm going to click once with my mouse, one left click. And then I can pull this out to any amount I want here. But you also notice down at that bottom, it's blue, I can also enter a dimension. So it's up to you whether you want to enter the dimensions as you're building it, or you click first and get your rectangle, then put the dimensions in. I'm going to enter the dimensions as I'm doing it, type in 50, and then I hit the tab key, and that switches me to the other dimension. I'm going to put in 20. And now when I click, and I can move this to either side, but that's fine. Now when I click, it kind of locks in place there. I am still in rectangle drawing mode. That tool is still active. So to unactivate it or go back to normal, I'm going to hit the escape key. So I can zoom in with my mouse, and this allows me to kind of get a little bit closer here. So next tool over, next to the rectangle, is the circle diameter tool. And again, there's a lot of different circles, but we're going to keep the first one, the center diameter. That's the one that's usually the easiest for me, the most common for me. And now I can draw a circle anywhere, but what I want to do is I want to come down this left side of this rectangle. And as I get towards the center, also known as the midpoint, you'll see it kind of snap in place and give me this little triangle. So once it snaps in using that triangle, I'm going to click once. And now I can pull out any size circle I want. However, where I want to go is actually snap onto the corner of that rectangle. So you see as I get closer, it'll actually snap into place, and it should say 20 because the rectangle's side length is 20. And this is also the diameter of the circle. So then once it's in place, I'm going to click again, and now I have my circle. So this is the main body of the key fob. One other thing though I want to do is actually put another circle in here. I'm going to go back to that center point, click again, pull out, and this time I'm going to type in a dimension, 13, and hit enter. So now I have two concentric circles, 120 and 113, centered at the midpoint of this side of the rectangle. So that's essentially it as far as this first sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and say finish sketch here. Now it used to, and sometimes it still does, switch views a little bit. I am not a fan of this view. For sketching, it's fine. I want to be looking straight at it. But when I go to extrude stuff, and I'll show you what I mean in a second, I actually want to be at a kind of a angle looking at this thing. It's entirely up to you. You can also click the home view here, and this is the view I kind of like the most for it. But typically the front right top corner is a good one. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see the whole thing. And now notice those sketch tools have gone away, and I'm back to my design tools again. So right here, there's a few. We did sketch. Revolve is a common one, but the next one over is the one we want, extrude. You can also click E or press E on your keyboard. You want to click extrude. And now I'm going to extrude specific what they call sketch profiles. You can only extrude things that are a contained surface. So you can't extrude like the world. You can't extrude the white background back here because it would literally be infinite. So you can only extrude constrained surfaces. So the first one I want is this one, and then I'm going to do this other side, and then I'm going to do the rest of the rectangle. Notice I am not selecting these two parts of the circle. If you do by accident, that's fine. Just click them again and it will unselect them. So you can, select and unselect your heart's desire. And then you'll notice this little distance here. This is how much I'm going to extrude it. And what I mean by extrude, I'm going to type in 4 and hit enter. It basically manifests kind of from a 2-dimensional shape to a 3-dimensional shape. And that is inherently the heart of, at least in my view, 3D modeling. You draw a 2-dimensional sketch and then either pull it up to make it into something new, like create a new object, or you can take it back down and cut into something that's already there. So that is a possibility. All right, from here, we're now going to sketch our uh, text onto here. So again, new sketch. And now I don't need these planes anymore. I'm not going to be using them. I actually have a surface to work with, the surface of this key fob right here. I'm going to go ahead and click the surface. Try not to get close to these planes because it might try to click on one of those instead. No, I want this surface. So now I need to put my letters in here. So that is going to be under text. So if you go here, there's a few different ones, create, and then there's more options. There's not just these 6. Like I said, that's the stock ones, but then you can actually add these to there too. But this is text for this one. So I have text, and then it says place the first corner of my text frame, and then the opposite or second corner. I'm not going the full size of the key fob because I want a little bit of space around it. And then I'm going to type in the initials. I can also do bold if I want to. And then there's alignment here. I can center it and align in the center here. And then I'm good. I'm allowed to just go with this. If I think the letters need to be a little bit bigger, which I kind of do, I'm going to change this from 10 to maybe 13. And I got a pretty good sized word here for my first name. So go ahead and click OK. And then finish sketch. Last thing now, we're going to extrude those letters. Back up here to extrude again. I'm going to click on the T, O, and the M, and they all select together. And I'm going to extrude this up. You can do 1 up to 2 probably. I wouldn't go crazy, like I wouldn't extrude it out like 20 or anything like that. But between 1 and 2 is usually pretty good. And then notice down here, these extrudes, this one is an operation join. It basically is going to weld or join the fob with the letters together so it's all one piece. And then go ahead and click OK. So now I have my key fob here, and it looks pretty good. The only thing I'm going to do a little bit change or do a little bit extra is I'm going to round off these corners a little bit. Believe it or not, with plastic and these sharp corners, they can actually kind of be surprisingly pokey in your pocket or in your hand or things like that. So we're going to round them off, kind of like taking a piece of sandpaper. So up here, I'm going to click. Now in design tools, I'm heading on over a little bit more to the modify section. And there is a few different ones, but the one I want here is fillet, F-I-L-L-E-T. And it's also the letter F on the keyboard. I'm going to click it. And then you have some options here. You can select either faces or edges. I'm going to select this edge right here, this interior circle, just the edge though. Let me be clear. I'm not selecting this whole face, just that boundary between where it kind of goes from vertical to horizontal. And then I can type in either here, well, I'll do it here actually, type in 1 from a radius and click OK. And what you'll see here is it rounds that over. Let's try that again, another fillet. I'm going to do this edge here and here, put 1 in again, and click OK, and you can see now it has rounded over this top edge. One more time, I'm going to click fillet, and then I'm panning here by holding down the middle mouse scroll wheel. I'm going to click here, hold shift and my middle mouse button or scroll wheel and move it around and click here. Also 1 and click OK. So this rounds it off a little bit, makes it a nicer finished look. You can also do the same thing on the bottom, but typically I won't, just because I want a nice flat surface for printing. So it's just, you can do it if you think it'll be okay, but with our new flexible build plates, you can snap them off a little bit easier. We used to fill at the bottoms when you had to get like a knife or a scraper underneath to pop it off the build plate. But for these purposes, it works fine. So that is my key fob. We are good to go. The one thing that kind of stands out is, I think this sticks up a little too far. So where was that? Well, down here is a timeline. And this was the fob's extrusion. and then this was the letters. And I'm like, you know what? That's a little too much. So I'm going to right click and say edit. And now I can go back in here. Instead of 2, I'm just going to maybe say 1. Click OK. And that looks a little bit better. Well, maybe I want 1.5. It's up to you. You can, change whatever you want. So I can click save and then like do a version description. So this I'm just going to call completed and click OK. So that's my fob. That's been saved. It should be good to go. Last thing we're going to want to do is export it or save it as an STL. We'll get more into that when I get to the printing side of things, but I'm going to go ahead and click File. And then down here, actually, no, I'm going to click here, right click. I'm getting mixed up now with Onshape and Fusion. It's only been 2 weeks. I'm going to right click here on Key Fob or down here on Fob itself, right click and say Save as Mesh. So there is an export one, but that has to go to the cloud. Save as Mesh does it locally, so that's actually quicker and easier. And then over here, it's just selecting the fob itself. So that's important if you're trying to do a whole project versus you just want to print one part, that's where you would select these. So got one key fob here. STL binary is fine. You can also do a 3MF or an OBJ, but binary for our purposes today will work no issues. There is an option to send a 3D print utility, like if you have your laptop and you have a specific slicer and you're kind of at home and have all of this set up. But for our purposes, I'm going to not have that checked. Go ahead and click OK. And then you're going to save this somewhere, probably on your desktop. You may want to change the name a little bit to maybe like have your name in there. If everybody has fob, when you go to 3D print them and you're saving them to a flash drive, you will be like, all right, which fob is my fob? So if you name it something unique, it'll be a little bit easier to find. So I'm going to save this to my desktop, click save, and that's it. We're all done. So that's how to create a key fob in Fusion 360 and also export it as an STL. Thanks.